Welcome to Dental Business RX. Practice success in 30 minutes or less.
Thank you for calling ABC Dental.
How many hours are you working per week? And by this, I mean everything practice related. Chairside, admin, etc. And another question. Do you consider these number of hours that you're working to be too much? In other words, are you working more hours than you'd like, or are you working so many hours that it's making it difficult to maintain a decent work-life balance? Well, if you're like many of your colleagues, you'd probably answer yes to this last question. And to that end, this is not an unusual symptom when we begin working with a new client. When they first sign up, they may be working 5-6 days a week, and to one degree or another are stressed out about it. Now, you could take an unsympathetic view on all of this and say it's self-inflicted, and that's true to a point. No one's forcing them to work that much. But the better light of inquiry would be, why are they working so many hours? Why work 10-hour days 5 to 6 days a week, or in some cases, be open late the whole weekend? The motivation behind this, when you speak to a doctor in this situation, makes sense when they initially went down that path. They wanted to be more successful. I can appreciate that. They see patients asking for evening and weekend appointments. They figure if they're the only practice in town open on Sundays, they'll, corner the market. Or the idea of working more is equivocated with working harder. They tend to extend hours in an effort to capitalize on these opportunities. And like I said, while I can appreciate the sentiment, the things I see happening with hours is one of these cases where more isn't always the best move. And in some cases, it can actually make things worse. It can make your practice less efficient and less productive. So if you feel like you're working too many hours, or the idea with messing with your office hours has been on your radar, this episode is for you. We're going to discuss if and under what conditions it might be a good idea to extend your office hours, as well as when it would be a really bad idea. My name is Jeff Bloomberg, and I'm your host. And why don't we start out with what office hours you should be working? Well, and I say this with the idea that you would maintain good judgment in the matter. Your office hours should be whatever you, the owner doctor, want them to be. And again, remember I said good judgment. You can't work one day a week if that's not going to be adequate for the success of your practice, okay? But if you can figure out a reasonable amount of time that you need to work in order to meet your production and your revenue goals, then that's fine. Maybe you want to work 4 days a week from 8 to 4 and a half day on Friday, Monday through Thursday, 8 to 4, half day Friday, or just Monday through Thursday, 8 to 4. Again, the thing you always want to check it up against is, can you meet your revenue and production goals if you're scheduled efficiently? And we have clients who work 18 hours a week, or I can think of one fellow in particular who ended up cutting his office hours from 4.5 days a week down to 3 while he was doing the MGE program, because he was local, so he was coming regularly to the office every week for his training. And he finished his program. His practice had more than doubled, working 3 days a week. So he decided, I'm going to keep working 3 days a week. And he started teaching a day a week. The bottom line is you can kind of do whatever you want to do. And let me make something perfectly clear. It doesn't matter where you are, whether you're in the city, rural, etc. If you can't make your office work profitably on a reasonable schedule, it is not because of patients in your area only wanting to do evening or Saturday appointments, or patients can't come off work to go to the dentist, or that patients in your area are different in some way, or that you're not working 50 hours a week. This is a case where I have thousands of clients, or call them case studies if you'd like, to back up what I'm saying. If you're having problems making it on a normal schedule, being successful on a normal schedule, 40 hours a week total time in the practice, maybe 32 hours clinically, this is an office or a you problem. And I say that with ultimate kindness. I'm not trying to make you wrong. This is a you problem. This is an office or a you problem. For example, let's say you want to work from 8 to 4 every week, and you want to take lunch at noon every day, noon to 12:30, 12:45, and you want your mornings to be time for case presentations and primary, in other words, high dollar procedures, and you want your afternoons to be primarily delivery procedures or secondary, lower figure procedures as far as dollars go, and deliveries and things like this. Let's say that's your ideal, right? Well, that is completely doable. I can show you thousands of people who do that. It's really not that difficult. However, let's say you go to implement that and you start getting pushback. Patients don't want to come in the morning. Patients only want to come in the evening. Here's where you go wrong, okay? This is where I see people go wrong. I'm not necessarily saying you, maybe you don't have a problem with this. But you get that pushback, and instead of looking at it and going, well, is this actually doable? You immediately assume that it is true. Patients in your area or your office or your practice just don't want to come in the mornings. It is absolutely not true. That all comes down to your scheduler and how your scheduler is trained. I had a client who had a scheduler that was not very good. Place was not super productive, and he tried to implement a scheduling system just like I'm describing, and the scheduler couldn't get people in the morning for primary procedures. So he'd come in and see, 4 crown preps at 4:30 and things like this when they were supposed to be on the schedule at 8:30 in the morning. So finally, he and the office manager sit down with the scheduler, and she blurted out something that to this day, just, one of the, when you hear things you remember from 20 years ago and they just burn in your brain. Her thing was, well, you can't tell people what to do, meaning she couldn't tell patients when to be there. That's absolutely not true. It's your business. You can absolutely, you're not telling them what to do. You're not the boss of them, but this is your practice. This is when you're open. This is when you see patients. This is how it works. If I want to go to a restaurant that's open from 5 to 10 at night, that's the only time I can go. And they're not open Sundays. I can't go Sundays. Maybe I could, cater out a special event or something like that. But if I'm going to go as a normal restaurant patron, I can't go. Some stores are open 24 hours, like 7-Eleven. All right. But if I want to buy, a suit, there's very few places I can buy a suit that's open 24 hours a day. So yeah, to a large degree, you can control when customers come into your business. Actually, ultimately, you can control when customers come into your business. This is a you thing. So funnily enough, this client I referenced in my example earlier ended up replacing his scheduler, and he explained to his new scheduler, this is when we do primary appointments, etc. And this new scheduler scheduled those types of procedures in the morning. It was actually not a problem. I mean, there were some funny stories. This is where I've used this as an example before, but she scheduled 3 root canals at the same time at 11 o'clock in the morning in 3 chairs for the same doctor because it was productive. So, the doctor didn't get mad. He thought, okay, she's really trying, and had to explain how this was physically impossible to do, and they had to rearrange it. But he explained he wanted the higher dollar procedures in the morning. The office manager explained the same thing, and this person had no trouble telling patients to be there. And, people will ask, well, how do you tell patients to do this? Well, this is when the doctor does these procedures. I mean, you as the doctor, when you sell the procedure, should probably tell the patient that. That makes it even easier. Then you're exercising some degree of control in your schedule as well. When you're presenting those 4 crowns, tell the patient when they go off to, wrap up their financial arrangements with your treatment coordinator, listen, I do these appointments in the morning. So I'd have to see you, I do them between 8 and 11. That's usually my slots for these things. Does that work for you? Or you don't have to say that. You just tell them that's when you do them. And you might even ask your treatment coordinator, hey, when is my next appointment like this available for this type of procedure? Oh, day after tomorrow, doctor. You could then turn to the patient and say, does that time slot work for you? Obviously, you're not scheduling the patient. You have people, your scheduler does that, or you're going to get in trouble because you're not probably supposed to touch the appointment book. But you could help push that in that way. And in most cases, the patient's just going to listen to you because you're the doctor. This is a surgical procedure. This is when you do it. If it comes down to the front desk scheduling, they could just say, this is our office policy. This is when the doctor does these procedures. Most people can get off work. They can get a note and bring it to, for doctor's appointments. People do this all the time. It's really not that big of a deal, despite what you may be being told. It isn't that difficult to do. That's why I say it's a you problem in that sense, okay? So the bottom line here is you have to be able to control your schedule, right? And tell people when to be there. The only other thing I'd say that I've seen as a bit of an alarming trend that I've seen with newer clients as they're coming in is I would say, and I spoke with, when I had Jeff Santone on a week or two ago, we talked about this on the episode. The idea of using scheduling procedures and policies seems to have become less prevalent in the last 10 or 15 years than it was, let's say, in the early 2000s. I would meet newer clients in the early 2000s. They had at least been exposed to some form of a scheduling system in order to put order into their schedule. We have one as well that's really good, but which I'll talk about here in a second. But in other words, they had a system. This is when primary procedures go. We're supposed to figure out how long each type of procedure should take and so on. We're seeing less and less offices do this. It's just sort of, fill the slot on the schedule, put it in the empty spot. And also, there's a bit of what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of an unrealistic assessment of how long things actually take. So the doctor wants to see a patient for a procedure that really takes the doc 2 hours. It's going to take the doc 2 hours from start to finish, and the doctor's asking for an hour and a half. And then it just throws the complete schedule into disarray. Because up at the front, they've put another patient in an hour and a half later, and you're not going to be done for 2 hours. So it really, a dental office should not be frantic. You shouldn't be running around. There's always going to be moments where there's emergencies and things like this, or things get a bit overwhelming, or the schedule didn't work out or whatever, sure. But that should be the exception rather than the rule. I mean, truthfully, the loudest thing when I walk into a practice I want to hear is like the compressor. I don't want to really hear, running. Obviously talking, happy talking, people I'm being, I'm joking when I say this, but it should be just down to business, moving smooth. Everybody's on a schedule. Nobody's waiting. Patients don't ever really wait. And if they do, it's no more than 5, max 10 minutes. Everything's just running like clockwork. That's how an office should run. And it's very easy to actually make it run that way. We're just seeing less people coming in with that background training or having been exposed to it. So it is up to you to run control on the schedule. You have to be able to do it. Otherwise, you're going to end up in a situation where, patients come in whenever they want, and you're going to work 50, 60 hours a week in order to accommodate them because everybody wants evenings and weekends. Now, to help you with this, as my shameless plug of the episode, there's 3 things I'm going to suggest. The first thing is here at MGE, we do a free seminar called Art of Scheduling Productively. It's about 4 hours long. I'll put a link to it on the episode webpage. It really is free. You could attend this for free. You don't have to buy anything if you attend it, okay? If you do buy something, that would be nice too. But there's also our online platform, which is a subscription-based platform, DDS Success. Now, DDS Success has a ton of training on it. It's got a lot of the sales training we do, a lot of organizational training. We just uploaded some financial planning courses there as well, financial management. But it also has a version of Art of Scheduling Productively on there that you can watch on demand. And it's actually a good video for the entire practice to watch so everybody knows how the schedule works. It also has a full implementation checklist. We also dig deeper with positional training for the schedule coordinator, which is about 3 or 4 hours long. It's very, very complex. So very good to train your scheduler with. You can check that out. You could also we do a 2-day seminar here at MGE called Scheduling for Production, which gets really heavily into the schedule. If you want to check that out as well, I'll put all of these links on the episode webpage if you want to look into any of this, okay? So assuming you can run control in your schedule and you're working hours that are adequate for your production or revenue, and you're happy with the hours that you're working, there's really no reason to change or extend your hours, okay? Don't get into, you've heard the term FOMO before, fear of missing out. People get into FOMO over this. Oh, if I were just open Sunday. Oh, if I just did this, more patients would come in. It's very similar to when you see a practice dropping their fees in an effort to attract more patients. I remember the first time I saw this, I was in Vegas, and they had a billboard for a $6.99 implant. And I'm thinking, wow, that's pretty cheap. I don't know if that included, the whole thing or just placing the implant itself. Probably just the implant. But either way, sure, you might have a patient go, well, I can't see you, doctor, because you charge way too much for an implant. I can go get a $6.99 implant. Well, fine, you're going to lose those people. You may lose a patient who says, well, doctor, you're not open till 8 p.m. and you're not open on Saturdays, so I'm not coming to see you. Okay, it's going to be a very small percentage of the people coming into your practice. It won't happen a lot. And just realize you can't please everybody. It's never going to happen. And you have to live too. So assuming all those things are in place, you're running good control, you can meet your goals within that time period, and you're happy with your schedule, then I wouldn't change at all. Last couple points on this, specifically, is if the idea of extending hours is in your mind, is one thing that doesn't get looked at when you're adding hours. Let's say I'm running a 40-hour office week with 32 clinical hours. And then I go, I want to open 2 more days a week. I'm going to open Saturdays, and we're going to open a couple evenings here. Well, how am I going to staff those hours? What most people do, they don't want to go off and hire somebody. So what they do is they end up, let's say you had 3 people up at the front. One handled the schedule, one handled insurance, and one's your office manager, let's say, who also did treatment coordinator duties. Well, what they'll do is they'll have the staff working on different shifts. So then, the scheduler / receptionist comes in first thing and leaves at 4, and the insurance person comes in at 11 so that they can close out, and the office manager kind of works somewhere in between. You end up having to do the same thing with dental assistants and sometimes hygienists. The problem with this is you're now splitting your team up. And look at a team sport. Team sports work primarily because, there's a lot of reasons team sports work, but one of them is everybody on the team is there at the same time. That's part of one of the basic requisites for having a team. How can you have a team if not everybody's there at the same time? It makes it very difficult. And to that end, if you find yourself doing this, let's say you went from 3 people up at the front, it's running well, it's running efficient, and now you're splitting them up because you've extended hours. I had a client who had this very situation. He was doing 5 days a week. And because of the amount of hours the office was open, his staff would start getting into overtime if he kept them around for the entire office's hours. So he split people's shifts up a bit. So what we did is we actually reduced office hours to 4 days a week, and he had a little bit of training time on the 5th day, and his revenues went up, and everybody was working less because everybody was there at the same time. It was more efficient. It was more effective. Little balls didn't get dropped between the cracks and things like this, okay? The only other issue I'd bring up is, I mentioned that what makes it work is you can meet your revenue and production goals within that schedule. The only time this might become an issue is if you have a fee problem. I talked about fees a second ago, meaning let's say you're very heavily in network and you're taking a 50% haircut on most of the procedures you're doing. I think somebody I was talking to Jeff Santona 1 or 2 episodes ago about this very thing. One of the recent analyses he did with a new client was, when they looked at all the points they were in network, they were losing 45% of their revenues. Well, if I work 40 hours a week, and in that 40 hours I would normally at full fee produce, $50,000, but I'm doing the same amount of work, but because my fees are lower, I'm now only producing 27. Well, that creates a problem in a number of ways. It's an obvious math problem, but also keep this in mind. Just because I'm charging less for the crown doesn't mean it's cheaper for me to do it. You're not saving any money on prep. You're not saving any money on the assistant who's helping you. You're not saving any money on the impression material you're using, or the scan, which is free. You're not saving money on the lab fee. You see, you're not saving money on any of this stuff. And all the other expenses attendant to just the office being open, your electric bill, things like that. So that's one area that can throw you a little bit of a curveball. So without getting into a whole diatribe about this, I think if you've been listening for a while, you know my feelings on being in network. You need to start looking at how to get out. I won't rehash it all. What I'll do is this. If you want help getting out of network smartly, because when you get out, you actually want to see your revenues go up and your stress and your overhead go down. So we have something called the fees and plans analysis. I'll put a link to it on the episode webpage. It's free, and I'm not kidding, it's free. You could do it and do nothing. Or you might do it and go, wow, I love these guys, I want to buy something or try out your services. That's cool too. But either way, I'll put it on the episode webpage if you want to check it out, because in this day and age with inflation and everything else, I don't want to get started on this, or this is what the episode's about. You need to start looking at getting out, okay? But you want to do it intelligently. All right, so now, when would you look at adding hours? When would it make sense to add hours? Well, the first thing is, and let's not talk specialized situations. And by that I mean, let's say you have a scratch practice and there's just not a lot of patients yet, and you're working a day and a half a week. Well, obviously you're going to add days when there's more patients. That's sort of a no-brainer, right? Let's say you've got an established practice, you're working 4.5 days a week, and you're thinking about adding hours to your practice. When would it make sense? Well, first thing would be, let's say your schedule is just so packed that you can't fit any more patients. So if you find yourself in that condition, before I would add hours, I'd do a couple of things. First thing is I would make sure my schedule is super efficient, okay? And to learn how to do that, I gave you those links to those different scheduling trainings that we do. You're properly double booking. You have 2 well-trained assistants. Your assistants are doing everything and are capable of doing everything that legally they are allowed to do in your jurisdiction, in your state or your province, okay? They can do all of those things, and you are just working super efficiently, super productively. So that would be the first thing I would do. If I found myself booked out, I'd go, okay, let's make my schedule more efficient. All right. Next thing I would do, if you're still packed with an efficient schedule, is if you're in network and you haven't started getting out, now's a good time to start because you're already packed. So let's say you get out of network. Now follow my logic here. You're packed. You made your schedule super efficient, so now you're super hyper productive, and then you're still in networks, and now you start phasing your way out of network. Again, do this smartly. You don't want it to be a cold water dip, right? You want this to be smart, and you want to be able to sleep at night. Fees and plans analysis. Anyway, so you've made your schedule efficient. Now you're out of network. So now you're working, you're efficient, you're super productive. You're charging, for the most part, full fee for just everything you're doing. All right, well, and you still have no space to fit patients. All right, let's say you got 4 chairs and you already have 2 hygienists and you're working out of 2 and there's just nowhere to go. We have a couple choices at that point. First one I would probably look at, rather than extending my hours, would be add chairs. Chairs are really cheap these days. You can add a whole op. I was talking to a rep recently who was telling me he could equip an office with 4 chairs and a cone beam for $100,000. So you can do a lot these days with what's available to you. So I would add chairs, and you might go, Jeff, why would you add hours before you add chairs? Well, number one, I'd have to have the ability to add chairs, meaning I have the space, right? And many offices that are 4 ops maybe start out plumbed for 6 or 8 or whatever. But why add chairs rather than adding hours? Well, if I add chairs, I can add more providers and I can add more staff. I would rather, if I had a 40-hour-a-week office, with 32 clinical hours, I'd rather we're all there at the same time, especially with the new associate. I want to make sure that this person is, really good. I don't want to have a situation when I have to go in on my off time to make sure my associate's doing a good job and to get to know them. I'd rather they're there at the same time I am. We develop a really good working relationship and so on at the same time. And that's how you do it. You do it by being there at the same time. It's also great if you want them to cover for you if you're going to be leaving town. You don't have to, mess with the hours too hard. It all works out. All right, so let's say you've done that. You've made your schedule efficient. You've gotten out of network. You've added chairs and providers. And again, there's a smart way to do that. I'm not going to get into it in this episode. I've actually talked about it before. I think the episodes when I got into associates, all about associates. But let's say you've done that, and now you're just out of space. You're out of space. You're open 8 to 4, 4 days a week, and a half day on Fridays. And you guys are just slammed. Well, number one, you're not a network and you're booked out of 6, 8 chairs, 5 chairs, whatever it is, you're going to be super productive and super profitable. So first off, well done, right? But you don't want to slow your growth. So what do? Now you might look at adding hours. But the way you do it is you don't just go, okay, I'm working 30 hours a week now. I'll just work 50. That's not how we do it. You're not going to add to your hours at all. You're going to work the same amount of hours as the owner doctor. What you're going to do is start a second shift. In other words, let's say we had in our scenario here, the office is open 8 to 4, 4 days a week, and let's say 8 to 12 on Friday. What you do is you maybe open the office earlier, 6:30 or 7, and you close it at 7 at night, 4 days a week, right? Or maybe even 5 days a week. So we've added 7 hours on Friday. We've added, 4.5 hours, 4 additional days. So that right there is an additional 18 hours, 25 hours a week, and maybe a half day Saturday. So now we've added, 29, 30 hours a week clinically. And then you set up an entire different crew for each shift. So maybe you and the associate at this point, and you might have to bring in another associate to work during your shift, you see? So maybe you're a really good associate. It's like, hey, I'll take that second shift. You go, good. Well, you're kind of the head doctor on the second shift. I'm the head doctor on the first shift. I'm going to bring in another associate who's going to work with me on the first shift, so we're still busy, and we're going to start developing this second shift for you. You may have to phase into this. And then maybe you as the owner doctor, change your hours to working from 7 a.m. to, 3 p.m., 4 days a week, and, 7 a.m. to, 11 on Fridays, however you want to do it. There's different ways you can play with this. This is assuming you fully maxed out your facility before you start messing with your hours, and if you've ensured that you're going to be maximally profitable before you start messing with the hours. And that makes life really easy. We see this happen a lot, these split shifts, especially in big cities. Let's say you have a doctor in a high rise in Manhattan and there's just no space for additional chairs. This is what they do. They open up more hours and they split their shifts, right? But usually if we have a client wanting to split shifts before they're ready for it, we tell them to hold on and let's get efficient with the hours that you're working within now. So last point on this. What about the patients who like evening hours? Well, first question I have for you is, do you like evening hours? And you might go, no, I hate them. But I have a lot of patients asking for them. Well, okay, you know what? Do a compromise. Maybe one day a week you open up an evening. But don't change your hours for that. Let's say you're working 8 to 4 every day, Monday through Thursday, and 8 to 12 on Friday, or not Friday at all. That's a paperwork day. Well, then on Tuesdays, open from 11 to 7. Start 3 hours later and end 3 hours later. Work the same number of hours, but, you are available one evening a week. I mean, there's different ways you can play with this. It really isn't that big of a deal. But remember, ultimately, it comes down to how well you control things in the practice. So I hope all this makes sense. And remember, assuming it's a reasonable amount of time that allows your practice to meet its revenue and production goals and take care of your patients, you can practically work whatever schedule you decide is best. It, again, comes back to how you control things internally. I hope this helps. This episode should be airing on December 23rd. So if you celebrate Christmas, I wish you a Merry Christmas. Otherwise, to all you, wish you, I will be back at you before the New Year. But if I don't talk to you before the New Year, Happy New Year. Other than that, that's all I have for you this week. Don't forget, I have the links on the episode webpage to the different scheduling solutions, the free Artist Scheduling Seminar, the DDS Success Artist Scheduling Course, and Schedule Coordinator Training, and the MGE Scheduling for Production Seminar. I also have a link to the fees and plans analysis if you're looking at getting out of plans. And please, please, please take advantage of that. You really need to start thinking about that. Otherwise, if you want to know more about MGE, you can find us online at mgeonline.com or call us at 800-640-1140. Folks, have a great week, and we'll see you at the next episode.